I'm an OBGYN and I have gestational diabetes. Just got my diagnosis earlier this week, and as an OBGYN, yeah, it sucks. But I'm going to use this to first empower and educate myself, also to share my story with you guys and let you know that you're not alone, that your providers and your doctors also go through this, or at least that's my case. And we can learn about it together. I mean, I know what it is, but obviously when it's happening to you, you view it differently. And I'm not gonna lie, when I was first diagnosed, I wasn't shocked. I know I have the risk factors, but I was shocked, you know? Um, I think this would be my reality. I have my whole little kit of stuff, and I'm gonna walk you through it. First, let's talk about what exactly gestational diabetes is. It's also called GD or GDM, gestational diabetes mellitus. So let's just jump into it. Let's learn together. Let's make this a positive space. Let's go through this journey together. If you were recently diagnosed, if you've had it in other pregnancies, or you're in a similar situation, I would love for you to share that with me. Um, because it can feel very isolating and very alone. And oh my God, these hormones, you guys, I'm not usually emotional. I can feel really alone. It makes me feel really guilty. It makes me feel worried. It makes me feel like I did something wrong to harm this baby. And I just want what's best for this baby, and I want to give this baby the best life possible and the healthiest life possible. But I also want to be healthy for me so that I can be around for my babies. Not that this is going to kill me, that's extreme, but making changes to diet and lifestyle and my health is obviously going to prolong my life, but also I want to be an example for my kids. And I did not expect to get emotional filming this. This is embarrassing. But this is real. I mean, I've been checking my sugars. Today is day 4. I've been making changes. So let's talk the nitty gritty, answer the most common questions, and then I'll share my journey, my story, and yeah, let's get into it. I wrote down the most common questions. So I kind of want to quickly go over it, and then we'll jump into kind of my own personal experience and what I'm doing to educate myself and change my diet and stuff like that. So here we go. So the first question is, what is gestational diabetes and how does it differ from regular diabetes? So gestational diabetes is the type of diabetes that forms during pregnancy. So gestational means during the gestation or during pregnancy. So we only see gestational diabetes in pregnant people. Unlike regular diabetes or diabetes outside of pregnancy, gestational diabetes typically resolves after childbirth. Essentially, what's happening during gestational diabetes is that your body is not producing enough insulin to meet those extra needs of pregnancy. Ultimately, that's going to lead to elevated sugars or elevated glucose levels throughout the pregnancy. Diabetes, there's type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes outside of pregnancy. Type 1 is going to be more of that autoimmune disorder where your pancreas isn't working, so your body, your pancreas, isn't making insulin. So you don't make insulin, meaning these patients with type 1 diabetes typically either have an insulin pump or have to give themselves insulin. Now, when we look at type 2 diabetes, this is insulin resistant. And this is similar to gestational diabetes, where insulin, you're not making enough or your body's not responding to the insulin appropriately. So gestational diabetes behaves similarly to type 2 diabetes. Next question, what are the risk factors for gestational diabetes? Now, I can list off my own personal risk factors. One, I'm Latina, so being of Latina descent or Hispanic heritage puts you at an increased risk. Similarly, people who are African American, Pacific Islanders, Asians, I'll read the full list, but those populations are going to be at an increased risk of the development of gestational diabetes. My other risk factor is having a first degree family relative with type 2 diabetes, which applies to me. And here are some of the other risk factors: being overweight, having a family history of diabetes, being older than 25 during pregnancy, just turned 36. So again, another risk factor for me. Certain ethnic backgrounds like I covered. How does gestational diabetes affect the baby? Remember, sugar can freely cross the placenta. So when you have elevated sugar as the mom, that excess sugar is actually crossing the placenta without any issues and getting to your baby. So your baby being exposed to excess sugar can actually lead to excessive growth of the baby. And an excessive growth of the baby could lead to other complications. One of the ones that we see most frequently is complications during the childbirth. It can also lead to the risk of a premature birth. Sometimes if these kiddos, while they're in utero, get to be really, really big, they start to get very stressed out just because of all of the excess sugar in their bodies growing a lot faster. So it may then cause us to induce early or make a recommendation. If we notice that the baby is stressed out, we make a recommendation to have your baby earlier, and it could lead to respiratory distress in that newborn. Other risk factors that we see with these babies is typically if your sugars are not well controlled, once that baby is born, the baby's going to have a struggle regulating its own sugars, regulating its insulin. So then that could lead to further complications in the baby, or maybe even an admission to the NICU for the baby. What happens is that with all this excess sugar, the baby's exposed to the sugar, so the baby's body says, our sugar is really high, let's make more insulin. So then your baby is making all of this insulin to try and bring its own sugar down. Then when the baby is born, what we see is usually the opposite. These babies are born with a really low blood sugar or blood glucose level because this baby's so used to making excess insulin. That again could lead to complications because if your sugar's too low, it could lead to complications in the baby. So obviously controlling gestational diabetes is super important, not only for the mother's health, because even as adults and as patients and mothers, while we're pregnant, it's not good to have elevated sugars. It can cause a lot of damage to organs. So it's not just for your health, but you also want to make sure you're not exposing your baby to all this free excess sugar that could then lead to complications in their lives. Other risk factors that we see is that mothers with gestational diabetes, if it's not well controlled too, you can put your child at risk for the development of diabetes later on in life. So not necessarily as a newborn, but maybe childhood. Next question, can gestational diabetes be prevented? While it's not always preventable, so again, and I have to remind myself of this too, it is not my fault that I developed this. While it's not 100% preventable, there are definitely steps that you can take prior to pregnancy and during pregnancy to maintain a healthier lifestyle. Obviously, that's going to be exercise and diet. So things like eating a well-balanced diet, getting regular exercise during pregnancy, and managing your weight gain during pregnancy as well. How is gestational diabetes managed? When you first get the diagnosis of gestational diabetes, we allow the patients, and like I'm allowing myself, to check the blood sugars and then make changes to lifestyle and diet to see if that way we can control the sugars. That's why it's so important. Like lifestyle, diet, exercise is so important. It helps us regulate our sugars and avoid using medication. But ultimately, after this period of trying to make adjustments to lifestyle, diet, exercise, if that's not working and your sugars are still high, then the mainstay of treatment during pregnancy is going to be insulin. So regardless, when you have your diagnosis of gestational diabetes, be ready to check your sugars 4 times a day. And if you start medication, you start medication because that's what's going to be best for you and your baby. Next question, how does gestational diabetes impact future pregnancies? Women who have had gestational diabetes are at an increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes later in life. Now, I think it's like a crazy statistic where it's like women who have had gestational diabetes, for example, so me, I have anywhere from 20 to 70% chance of developing type 2 diabetes within the first 5 years after delivery. That's why it's so important, even after you have your baby and you deliver, that you still see your primary care provider to make sure that you're not developing type 2 diabetes. We also recommend that at that postpartum visit or in your postpartum period, with your OBGYN, you also want to make sure and take a 2-hour glucose tolerance test. So in pregnancy, we usually do the 1 hour and the 3 hour. In this case, you do a 2-hour glucose tolerance test to make sure that you haven't developed type 2 diabetes. Next question, can gestational diabetes affect my delivery plan? It might. Again, patients who develop gestational diabetes are going to be followed more closely, and you definitely want to keep this as an ongoing conversation with your provider to see what's going to be the best mode of delivery for you, but also, do you have to be induced? If I have to be induced, how early? They're probably going to want to do extra ultrasounds or growth ultrasounds on the baby. And it's not all one size fits all because everyone's sugar is going to be at a different place. As you can hear, my daughter, Eleanor, just woke up from her nap. I really thought I was going to have enough time to film this in one go, but I'm going to make sure to make the next video I film all about my personal journey, what my sugars have been looking at. I mean, I completely plan to show you guys my log, my supplies, how I check my sugars, resources I'm using. Like I have diet plans, recipes. I went to the supermarket, like all new things. And I want to share that portion with you guys because I think it's going to be really helpful. So forgive me, but that's going to have to be another video just because I have to go get my baby girl. There you guys, this little one came with me to say goodbye. Thank you guys so much for understanding, and I will see you guys in my next video. Like I said, I'll be explaining my personal story, what I'm doing, all that good stuff with you guys in the next video. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. I love you guys. I love being real and transparent and sharing this journey because it's hard even for me being an OBGYN. And I know and hope that you guys can relate, and hopefully this, I don't know, helps you in some way, make you feel a little less alone. I love you guys so much. I'll see you in the next video. We can do this. We're going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay. Love you guys. Bye.